Oi, what's happening, everybody? It's your Uncle Weezy here. Here to take you through the main event of UFC Vegas 28. We got Jairzinho Biggie Boy Rozenstruik facing off against Augusto Sakai. And we want to go deep into the statistics here. I'm taking you on a statistical deep dive through the matchup template that is available on DFS by the Numbers Patreon. And let's get into the statistics here and see if we can find a lean either way on who to go with in this fight. Going to be happening on June 5th. It is going to be the main event. And we have got Jairzinho Rozenstruik, as we can see here on the new matchup template that I'm creating. We've got Jairzinho Rozenstruik, 33 years old. Sakai, 30 years old. So Sakai a little bit younger. Rozenstruik with a 1-inch height advantage and a 1-inch reach advantage. Both of these guys are orthodox fighters. We got Biggie Boy coming out of Team Biggie Boy, and we got Augusto Sakai fighting out of the Gile Ribeiro team. Suriname, the country for Jairzinho Rozenstruik, the one and only Surinamese fighter that we've got, and we got Sakai coming out of Brazil. As far as the measurables go, a little bit less tread on the tires in terms of Sakai, 30 years old compared to 33, and we got 1-inch reach advantage, 1-inch height advantage for Rozenstruik. Not a lot to tell there unless we look at the fact that Sakai actually cuts weight to make 265. So even though Biggie Boy's, got a little bit of reach, got a little bit of height, I think Sakai will be the bigger, heavier man, and he moves pretty well. So I really don't see an advantage in terms of the tail of the tape one way or the other for these guys. Pretty even there. In terms of pro experience, we got Sakai with 18 professional fights, and we have got Rozenstruik with 13. The overall record, 15 wins, 2 losses, and a draw for Sakai. We've got an 11 and 2 for Rozenstruik. Cage time, we see that Jairzinho's got a little bit less, 108 minutes of career cage time compared to 180 for Sakai. Rozenstruik, the slightly better finisher, average fight time 8.35 minutes compared to 10 minutes for Sakai. A 9-year and 7-month professional career for Sakai, 9 years, 0 months for Rozenstruik. So we could tell there too. Sakai 5 more fights, but really not a whole lot more experience. And we do know that Jairzinho Rozenstruik outside of MMA has over 80 kickboxing fights. So he's got a ton of experience. Both these guys are very experienced martial artists. Rozenstruik, his skill set is largely just going to be stand-up kickboxing. While Sakai, his first martial art was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but as we'll look a little bit later on as we get into the striking and grappling stats, both of these guys do tend to keep the fight on the feet. We've got Rozenstruik with 7 UFC fights here, and Sakai with 6. Sakai with a 5-1 record, 5-2 for Rozenstruik. Cage time very close, 8 more minutes of UFC cage time in 1 less fight for Sakai. Average fight time 12.27 minutes for Sakai, 9.37 for Rozenstruik. In terms of finish stats, we see that overall here we've got the wins, the finish wins for Rozenstruik, 91% by KO, 0% by sub, and 73% by KO for Sakai, and 0% by sub. Neither one of these guys has shown any ability to finish by sub in their mixed martial arts career. Once again, another indication that this fight will probably take place standing. In terms of how they get finished, overall 50% by KO for Sakai and 50% by KO for Rozenstruik. Neither one of them has ever been submitted. So that, the finish stats slightly in favor of Rozenstruik. Rozenstruik, the slightly more prolific finisher. Let's get into the striking stats here. So the TSSL, TSSA, that is the total significant strikes landed and the total significant strikes attempted. And if we go down one, that's per minute. Significant strikes landed per minute, significant strikes attempted per minute. So we see that Rozenstruik here lands 3.14 and attempts 6.47 significant strikes per minute, while Sakai is at 5.76 attempted, or landed, and 11.33 attempted. So we can see that Sakai is not only the busier striker, he also lands more. In terms of accuracy, 50.84% accuracy for Sakai, 48.58 for Biggie Boy. The big difference here is in the power numbers. Biggie Boy, prolific with his power numbers, .023 2.43 is the knockdowns divided by significant strikes landed. So that tells us that Rozenstruik lands a knockdown 1.14 times per 15 minutes, but on 2.43% of the significant strikes landed, he gets a knockdown. For Sakai, it's 0.0071, so less than 1%. He gets 0.61 knockdowns per 15 minutes. So obviously Rozenstruik hits harder. Definitely more of a KO artist than Sakai, but Sakai is the busier striker. He throws more, and he's slightly more accurate. And when we get to the defensive numbers here, we see that while Augusto lands 5.76 strikes, he only absorbs 4.5 per minute. So he's dealing out more than he's taken in. But that's not true for Jairzinho. Jairzinho, he lands 3.14 strikes per minute, but absorbs 3.48 per minute. So he's actually getting hit more than he's hitting his opponents. Kind of a red flag there. That's not a good thing to see. But sometimes people with as much power as Jairzinho, other guys like Derek Lewis do this. Ngannou does that. He gets outlanded by his opponents. But it doesn't really matter when you have that kind of power. You can take one or two to give one, and oftentimes when that one lands, it gets your opponent out of there. So, but we do see that Rozenstruik gets hit more than he does hit. While that's not a problem for Sakai. And we see that 39.2% is the striking defense for Rozenstruik. That I'll take a look at some stats that I sorted by the heavyweight division for you a little bit later on here, but that is the worst in the heavyweight division. He has the worst striking defense in the heavyweight division. Augusto Sakai, 48% striking defense, right in the middle. Here we look at the total knockdowns divided by the total significant strikes absorbed, and we see that Augusto Sakai has actually never been knocked down in the UFC, while Rozenstruik has been knocked down once. That was by Francis Ngannou, and he slept him. So that leads to 0.23 knockdowns absorbed per 15 minutes for Rozenstruik. He's only been knocked down once in the UFC, while Sakai has never been knocked down, but has been knocked out once. That was by Alistair Overeem. And that was a ground and pound knockout. So while we look for Rozenstruik to get that standing strike that leads to a knockdown, leads to a win, that has not happened yet to Augusto Sakai, where he's been knocked down. But he also hasn't faced somebody with the power of Rozenstruik, so it's not to say that it cannot happen. Let's get into the grappling stats now. We can see that Jairzinho Rozenstruik not only has no takedowns, but he hasn't even attempted a takedown in the UFC. While Augusto Sakai has only attempted one takedown, and he got it. But it was in his first UFC fight, which was a Contender Series fight, and the guy he was fighting was a 205-pounder. I think the guy weighed in at 211 for a heavyweight fight. So the guy was naturally a light heavyweight, and Sakai went to his wrestling late in that fight. He got the one takedown. He stayed on top of him, and he pounded him out on the ground. So we've got defense here. Jairzinho Rozenstruik showing an 80% takedown defense. His opponents have only been successful on 6 out of 30 takedowns, while Sakai's opponents have been successful on 5 out of 13 takedowns for a 61.54% takedown defense. We don't really have to worry about Augusto's takedown defense because Rozenstruik has never even attempted a takedown, and it's very clear that he's a boxer and that he's going to keep the fight standing. What we don't know is whether Sakai is actually going to use his grappling in this fight. There is a huge hole there for Jairzinho. Not a good grappler. When he does get taken down, he has a hard time getting back up. And if Augusto doesn't like the way the fight is going on the feet, he does have the opportunity to try to take this fight down. He will be heavier. He has better jiu-jitsu than Jairzinho, so that's a potential avenue for him to win a round or two, or to try to take some of the power out of Jairzinho's punches. Maybe he goes to some grappling early. So even though the grappling statistics, they don't show us much, we do see that 80% takedown defense for Rozenstruik, which is solid. But I want to also point out one thing that I can show you here on the advanced stats, also available on the DFS by the Numbers Patreon. And these are Jairzinho Rozenstruik's stats here. And if we go through all of his opponents, we can see here we got Gondo, Santos, Ngannou, Overeem, Arlovsky, Crowder, and Albini. If we go to the defensive side of things here, we can see on takedowns and takedowns attempted that Albini was 2 for 6, Overeem 2 for 10, and Gane 2 for 14. But in every fight where Rozenstruik's opponent has attempted a takedown, he has been taken down. So that's, like I said, there's not a lot of grappling stats out there for this fight, but it doesn't mean that Augusto won't go to his grappling. Okay, and then we can also see the control time here stats. Rozenstruik has been controlled 24.37% of the UFC cage time, while Augusto has been controlled 11.21%. So, if we look at the control time here for Biggie Boy, 0.84%. So he never controls his opponent, even on the cage or on the ground. But he has been controlled 24.37% of the time. So that's a hole. It's a hole because he has a tendency to get out-controlled by his opponent. So that is an avenue there for Sakai. The next thing I'm going to take you through is going to be the strength of schedule. And I use my strength of schedule metric, which is available on DFS by the Numbers Patreon. And if we go here, we can kind of see how these things get calculated. And we see here, this is Biggie Boy here. We see Cyril Gane, he had a loss, and Gane was 5-0. He has a loss to Ngannou, who's 11-2. And then we add up the victories, the opponent's records of the people that he has beaten. And we see that, if we add up the wins, it's 50-36 is the combined record of opponents that Biggie Boy has beaten. And in his 2 losses, he lost to guys that have a combined record of 16-2. We take that up right here to the strength of schedule metric, and what this gives us is ratios and average win-loss records for his total, for his winning fights, and for his losing fights. So it kind of tells us the strength of schedule in his overall, in his wins, and in his losses. And it's a pretty cool tool because it can kind of tell you with putting a number score on it how tough the level of competition somebody has fought. So here we see Rozenstruik, and here we see an overall ratio of 1.94. So what that means is once we strip out Rozenstruik's opponent's fights against Jairzinho Rozenstruik, we take the leftover record and we divide the wins by the losses, and it tells us the win-to-loss ratio. 1.94 wins for every loss Jairzinho Rozenstruik's opponents have had, while it's only 1.38 for Sakai. So that it shows us that Rozenstruik is fighting the tougher level of competition here, and that the total fights, that he's even fighting the slightly more experienced competition than Augusto, because the average amount of total fights that his opponents has outside of fighting him, 13.86, as opposed to 12.67. We can go down here for the ratio of Rozenstruik's wins, 1.61 to 1.38 here for Sakai. So slightly better wins and slightly more fights, so he's fighting the slightly better level of competition there. And in the losses, we know that Biggie Boy is the only loss to Gane and the champion Ngannou. They have a combined record of 16-2. If you throw out their fights with Rozenstruik, that means they're 14-2 in the UFC. You divide 14 by 2 and you get a 7 win-to-loss ratio. So, basically he averages, when he loses a fight, he's averaging fighting a guy with like a 7-1 record. But, we know that Sakai has a 5-1 record in the UFC, so it's, even though Rozenstruik has fought the better level of competition, it's not out of the realm of possibility here that Sakai could rise to the occasion here and beat him. And then we got the last 5 fights here. We see that Rozenstruik has fought Gane, Dos Santos, Ngannou, Overeem, and Arlovsky, while Sakai has fought Overeem, Ivanov, Tybura, Arlovsky, and Sherman. So we have some common opponents here. They both fought Andrei Arlovsky, and they both fought Alistair Overeem. Rozenstruik beat Overeem. Sakai lost to him, but we know that Rozenstruik got that knockout in the last 5 seconds of the 5th round, and if he hadn't gotten that knockout, it probably would have been a win for Overeem on the scorecards. Although it probably would have been close, probably 3 rounds to 2. And then we see in Arlovsky here, we see that they both beat Arlovsky, but Sakai beat him by split decision, and Rozenstruik beat him by KO in the first round. So I know there's not a lot of believers in MMA math out there, but it does help to look at common opponents, and we see that Jairzinho Rozenstruik has kind of gotten the slightly better of the common opponent battle here. Let me just move this over just to make sure that my head is not in the way so that you can see all this data here. The 1.94, 1.38, these are all this stuff here. So if you didn't get to see that before, if my head was in the way, now you can see it. But that kind of takes us through all the stats here. So if we just kind of go back over what we went, we see that the tail of the tape, Sakai a little bit bigger, a little bit younger, maybe a slight advantage there, but pretty even. Pro experience, UFC experience, very similar there as well. The striking statistics, while Biggie Boy has got that power, I do think that Sakai is the more well-rounded striker, and that if this fight does stay on the feet for 5 rounds and Sakai can not get knocked out, he's got a good chance of out-voluming him, out-pointing him, and out-moving him. Also, grappling, I think that while both guys have not went to their grappling at all, we could see potential for Sakai to maybe use some grappling in this fight, but he's only attempted 1 takedown in 6 UFC fights, so it's hard to say like, oh yeah, he's going to definitely go to his grappling. There's no evidence to suggest that. However, if he does, I think he could be successful. Every fight where Jairzinho's opponent has attempted to take him down, they have taken him down, but it's still only at a 20% rate. Rozenstruik, the better level of competition, has fared better against common opponents. What this is telling me is this is close, man. I mean, you could see paths to victory for Sakai with maybe using a little grappling, maybe outpointing him on the feet, out-voluming him, and landing the better strikes. But, you could also see Rozenstruik having that power advantage, stuffing some takedowns and maybe making it look good that way by landing the heavier strikes while maybe not landing more strikes. He could land the more impressive strikes and win a decision, or he could knock them out. But neither one of these guys seems all that prone to the knockouts. So I like the over 1.5 here, even though that's already getting juiced up to like -175. If you want to sweat out a 5-round heavyweight fight going to decision, you'll probably get some pretty sweet plus money on that. But I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to maybe pick Sakai by the slightest of margins here, but I could definitely see, this going either way. And the numbers are telling us that it's pretty close. Both of these guys have paths to victory. Both of these guys have a lot of experience. Rozenstruik's got power. Sakai's a little more well-rounded, and they both got really impressive UFC records. I wanted to show you one more thing that I've done, because I have this database, and it's got all of the fighters separated by weight class, and I kind of wanted to just take you through a couple of the statistics here. We got the fighter name up here, and we got significant strikes per minute, and we can compare Sakai, who's at 5.76, to Rozenstruik, who's all the way down here at 3.14. So we see that Sakai is far busier. When we look at the knockdown stats, we see that Rozenstruik is ranked 5th in the heavyweight division in knockdowns divided by total significant strikes landed, and at 2.43%, while Sakai here is ranked 16th at 0.0071. So while Rozenstruik does have that power advantage, it's not as big of an advantage. His power advantage isn't as big of an advantage as Sakai's volume advantage that we see over here. In terms of striking accuracy, 50.84% for Sakai, 48.58. They're both right in the meaty part of the curve here. And then if we go all the way over to the right here, we can see that this is the striking defense numbers. And while Augusto Sakai right here in the middle of the pack at 48%, we can see the Jairzinho Rozenstruik dead last at 39%. So I think that's where I'm kind of seeing the advantage for Sakai, is that if this fight does stay standing and if he can avoid getting that one big shot that knocks him on his ass, I think we can see him have the better defense, have the better movement, be more active, and win a striking-based decision here. I hope this was helpful for you guys. I am going to post the link to the matchup template here so that you can see all the statistics side by side. Feel free to click on that in the description of the video. If you found this helpful, please leave a thumbs up. Feel free to subscribe. I will be doing these videos regularly. And I wish all of you luck next Saturday. We still got about 9 days until the next UFC card, but I'll definitely do a couple more of these videos when we have some good data on some of the more veteran fights on this card coming up. But I wish you all good luck. Let's make some money, and I hope to see you again soon. Leave a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks for listening. Bye.